Okay, now we're going to do the video for section 3.4. And a lot of you have asked me in the past, not you guys, but in the past, students have asked me, Miss Bird, did you mess up? Is 3.4 supposed to be coming after 4.5? And yes, it is. The book is kind of weird. They're asking you to solve rational equations. And if you look, rational equations are, read the definition, an equation that contains at least one rational expression, which we defined in section 4.5. So don't ask me why they put 3.4 ahead of 4.5. Doesn't make good sense to me, but I've rearranged it so that I think it makes a little bit of sense. Now, you're going to be asked to solve, excuse me, solve rational equations, which are equations that contain one of these rational expressions that we just talked about in section 4.5. That means you do have to worry about domain, because if you get a solution, and I'm reading step 3 of the solving, check your solutions to make sure none of them are excluded from the domain. That's the only part that I think people are going to get tricked by and maybe miss one or two of these in section 3.4. Just when you get an answer, just check it against your domain and make sure that it's not been excluded. Alright, so I'm going to put the handout away pretty much now. I'm just going to write the problem up here so I can have all this space to show you how to work it. Okay, number 1. If you go back and read the steps from part 2 of the handout, the very first step says, find the least common denominator. Hint, you will need to factor any denominator that can be factored first. Well, I don't think we have to get into factoring, but you do have to remember least common denominator from back there in grade school. The least common denominator is the smallest number that both of these, or all three of these denominators will divide into. So, the least common denominator is a 6, because 2 goes into 6 and 3 goes into 6, but you also have to put an x there, because if you don't, this denominator would not divide into 6. Who even knows what x is? So you get the 6 from these two, and then you get the x from that third denominator over there on the right. So step 2 is multiply each one of these fractions by the least common denominator. So I'm going to multiply 6x by the 3/2. I'm going to multiply 6x times the 1/3. And I'm going to multiply 6x times the 1 over x. If you notice, I'm doing exactly what step 2 tells you to do. Multiply each term by the LCD. So I've got the least common denominator out in the front. Alright, now watch how this happens. I'm going to get another color of pen. Watch this. 2 divides into that 6 3 times. So 3x times 3 will make that a 9x. 3 divides into that 6 2 times. So now we just have a 2x times 1, which is 2x. Over here, the x will divide into a 6x. The x's cancel out and just leaves a 6. 6 times 1 is 6. Now you've got rid of all your fractions. You're just ready to solve. 11x equals 6. Divide by 11. X equals 6/11. Now, there's one thing that I promise you I always tend to forget. What was the domain up here? And you don't have to write it in interval notation. You just have to kind of jot it down so you can check your answer. This x, this denominator x, cannot be 0. Correct? We didn't get 0. We got 6/11. So you can put in for your answer for part 1, it will be B. The solution is 6/11. Number 2. By the way, that was the easiest one we have in this section. Number 2. 6 over x plus 8 is equal to 8 over x. Now let me show you something here. First thing I notice is this is not like number 1. Number 1 had 3 fractions. This one only has 2. So we don't have to use those 3 steps. We can do something called cross multiply. It's much faster, much easier than trying to find a common denominator for a bunch of algebra. But before I forget it, I'm going to go on and write over here just a little note to myself. Domain, x can't be 0, but from over here, x can't be -8. So if I get one of those two numbers, I'm going to have to mark them out and say no solution. So just keep that over there to pay attention to when we finish. All right, what is cross multiplying? It's when you take this numerator times that denominator. 6 times x is 6x. Crossing the other way, this numerator times that denominator. Now remember, you have to multiply it by both items in that denominator. You'll have 8x plus 64. 8 times the x, 8 times the 8. The reason it's called cross multiplying is because if you do draw those arrows like I just did, it looks like a cross. Crisscross. Okay, bring the 8x over to this side so we can solve this problem. We'll have -2x's equals 64. Divide by -2 and you get x equals -32. Glance up there. That's not breaking any rules with domain, so that's what you'll put in to choice A. Now my Labs Plus is really trying to mess with you here on these choices. Don't let them. That whole mess about solution set is x such that x is a real number and x cannot be blah 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 blah. That don't worry about that. You might have to pick C. There might be a no solution if something happens here with the domain. But choice A, and you just fill in -32. Which brings us to problem 3. And it looks to me like it's another cross multiplying. Y squared over y plus 4 equals 16 over y plus 4. Oh no, this one's even easier. We don't even have to cross multiply. These already have a common denominator. Do you see that? If you have a common denominator, if this happens, smile, because all you have to do to get your answers is y squared equals 16. Take the square root of that side, the plus minus square root of that side, and you get plus or minus 4. But I know what I forgot to do, something I keep warning you to not forget. Domain. Do it right up here. You should do it before you even start, but if you don't, if you forget like I did, just do it before you put in some wrong answers. Y plus 4 cannot be 0, so y cannot be negative 4. Uh-oh. Do you see where we've said we could put in a plus or a minus 4? But that up there says no, you can't put in the negative 4. So what you're going to put in for solution to number 3 is B. The solution is, and you're just going to write a positive 4. If the domain will not let us be negative 4, we'll just go with the positive 4.